The reviews for Monster Hunter Wilds are here, the sequel to the breakout Monster Hunter success that was Monster Hunter World that got a ton of people into this franchise to begin with. And with that, I want to break down, like I do for a majority of games I'm interested in and games within the RPG genre in general, what the reviewers are saying about it. Because as of right now, it does seem like the sentiment is very similar to what people had in the first and second beta, that the game is pretty damn amazing overall and an extremely good monster hunting experience for not only newcomers but also long-term fans of this franchise, garnering, albeit very early, a 90 on Metacritic. However, there is some negative feedback here as well that reviewers have been talking about. But before we get into the reviews, thank you guys so much for over 1,000 subscribers on the channel. I really appreciate the support lately on my videos. If you are new to the channel and you like gaming news and you like gaming reviews specifically with RPGs, but other genres here and there as well, please like and subscribe if you guys do like the video that you see here. Now let's get into it. So if you've played the betas, it was pretty obvious that this game was Capcom's take on an evolution of Monster Hunter World, a game that is supposed to be as dynamic as possible within the brand new open world experience that Monster Hunter has never actually done before. And with them trying to make this game as dynamic as possible, a lot of the mechanics you've seen in previous Monster Hunters are not necessarily changed, but interacted with in a different way to keep you out on the battlefield, to keep you out hunting, and to make as fluid as possible as you're going out exploring the world, going on hunts, different quests, investigations, etc. And so far, we've seen a lot of positive feedback regarding these changes that they have made to accommodate this more fluid and dynamic playstyle of Monster Hunter Wilds versus some of the previous Monster Hunter games you might have played. Quests being created on the go, for example, is a big thing to keep you out there on the hunt and just keep grinding different monsters or going and fighting different monsters that will immediately create a quest for you that you can just fight right then and there without having to go back, talk to the handler and pick up a quest and then go back out into the world and fight that specific monster. On top of this, base camp accessibility is pretty much everywhere. You can go to any base camp throughout the open world as you're exploring and craft things like your food to get ready for a hunt, or switch weapons, or do what you need to do before you go and fight out another monster. But again, these base camps are scattered throughout the open world. You don't have to, again, go back to a main hub and change these things in between hunts. On top of this, the mounting in this game, which is obviously a return from something like Monster Hunter Rise, for example. The mounting in this game also seems specifically tailored to accommodate this fluid gameplay style as well, with grappling to pick up loot that you're running past, and auto-pathing where you can do your whetstones and sharpen up your weapon while you're on your mount, or prep with different items, or take healing potions while you're chasing down a monster on a hunt. All of these are going to make the gameplay as fluid as possible so you can stay out there hunting and you can stay out there in the open world as long as possible. And in addition to all of this, your mount does give you the capability to switch between your second weapon. So if you want to try out a different weapon as you're going out in your hunts, you can do that. If you want two different weapons that have different elements on them that might be better for a specific monster or easier to hit a specific weak point, for example, this is also going to be available to you. And this isn't something everybody is going to consistently use. Me, for example, I pretty much, at least in the beta, only used the longsword. That's the weapon I've been using all the way since I was playing this game on PSP. I know a lot of longsword players do get shit on time and time again. However, if you do want that capability to switch weapons and to try something else out, that is there for you. Now, the next thing that we've gotten a lot of good positive feedback on with this game versus some of the previous games is, again, how dynamic this game is. And that's one of the biggest words that I've heard in reviews just in general, because monsters aren't just you go out on a hunt and you fight them. In this game, you're going to actually have to find the monster that might not come out all times of day. They might only come out at night. They might only come out with a weather change, for example. That's going to signal that monster now being available to be in the area. We saw this in the beta when the lightning came out. There was a lightning dragon that then was able to roam out in the map, and that was the hardest fight, at least in the first beta.
If I had to pick a single word that describes all of the things they're trying to do in Monster Hunter Wilds, it's to simply say that they are trying to make this game dynamic. Everything from the weather systems to monsters' schedules tying to different behaviors, fight styles, and even their spawning all introduce a new level of dynamism into moment-to-moment gameplay.
And with this, you're probably going to have to plan out your hunts. You got to fight certain monsters during the day that you need to get done for a specific quest or that you haven't fought before, and then nighttime comes around. There's different monsters available to you, both with the big monsters as well as the wildlife in general. Then the weather changes randomly, and you're going to have to go fight that monster, or you're going to have to wait until that same quote-unquote event or the weather changes again for that monster to be available. And in my opinion, Monster Hunter has always done the ecosystems and things like that the best of any game ever. It actually does make sense when these monsters are out in the world, or what these monsters are doing out in the world, and the different flora and ores that you find make sense to the environment that they're in, and the monsters even use the atmosphere and the environment to their advantage. And for example, in the beta, the Balahara would cause a sand whirlpool if you found him out there during the day that would pull you into it. And these environmental effects are going to be also something that you have to worry about as the player. And again, all of these dynamic changes to the world and different monsters coming out during certain times are also going to accommodate that fluid gameplay that they want you to have. They do not want you in this game, from what it seems like, to be going back to a hub consistently. They want you to be out in the world, running back to a base camp, getting ready, and going right back out to fight another monster that might be only appearing for a specific amount of time. Now, in terms of the combat in this game, when you're actually out there fighting monsters, there are a couple different changes here, but I think a lot, at least from what it looks like and what people have said online in their review, is this is pretty standard for what we've seen in Monster Hunter in the past. There's not too many new things here. It definitely seems like you're going to be very familiar with this combat if you played Monster Hunter World or even Monster Hunter Rise. Although from what we've heard, there has been some even small tweaks in terms of your character moving through animation so you're not getting stuck swinging in the air, and just in general some implementations on weapons that feel extremely good, to the point where this does feel like the best combat Monster Hunter has ever had.
The impact, like we had some hit stops complaints during the beta. You're not getting those here. There is no, it's so good. The impact feels fantastic. Overall, the combat is just absolute peak.
You do have the return of the Clutch Claw from the Iceborne expansion of Monster Hunter World, and then you also have new weak points that work a little bit differently in this game than versus previous games, and you also have the focus mechanic. Now, the weak points in this game are going to work a little bit differently because it's not necessarily just a weak point on the monster that's going to cause you to do more damage if you hit there versus a different area. And while you still have that, weak points in this game are going to show up based on where you are attacking on the monster the most consistently. If you're attacking on the head or the neck or the leg the most consistently, there are going to be weak points that open up there, and you're going to be seeing these by using the focus mechanic. You're even going to have something called a focus strike that each weapon has that's special to that weapon that's going to allow you to exploit this weak point, maybe do stagger damage, or maybe even knock the monster over. So while there is a lot of similarities here between this and previous games, there are some things that are going to make it a little bit different. I don't know if players are going to enjoy or not enjoy this, but from what we've heard so far, there's been pretty damn positive feedback about how the combat works in this game in general. And with how it's going to work with different weapons, we've definitely heard that monsters later on in the game have weak points that do open up in areas that some weapons might find hard to hit. So it might be a good idea to carry a second weapon that's going to allow you to hit this monster, whatever monster it may be, in the weak point that does open up for the monster based on the monster attacking you as well. Now, with the progression and how are you actually going to fight harder monsters or higher rank monsters, this is going to be very consistent to previous Monster Hunter games. You're obviously going to farm these monsters up, use the different materials that they drop or that you farm from them, and then you are going to then craft your different weapons or craft your different armor. These are going to be better or worse against some elements. They're going to have weapons that are doing more of a specific damage for a specific element, or just doing more damage than others in general, or have a different sharpness level. All of this is going to stay very similar from previous games that you probably have played before. Now, on top of this, you're still going to have decorations here that are going to be able to allow you to hone your build specifically to your playstyle, or even hone your build specifically to the monster that you might be fighting at any current moment. And again, the overall feedback for this progression seems to be relatively positive again, because this is a very similar progression system to what people liked in a game like Monster Hunter World, for example.
And that is, after all, what I think a lot of people love about Monster Hunter, is the idea that you can find one particular niche within the game's gameplay systems, and then you can become the master of that niche. If you want to build a loadout that is just about farming crits, like, you can do that. If you want to build a loadout that's just about tanking heavy damage, and then you got earplugs in so no tremors or yells or shouts, you know, bother you, you can do all of that. There's tons of cool things like that available to players in old games, and also in this one, certainly.
Now, all of this has been pretty damn positive so far. However, there are some negatives here, as I mentioned at the start of the video, with the biggest one being the difficulty. If you came from Monster Hunter World, that was one of, if not the hardest Monster Hunter game pretty much ever created, or at least since way back in the day from the very early Monster Hunter games. And if you're coming from that game into this game, it seems like it's going to be a completely different experience, with some reviewers saying that this is the easiest Monster Hunter ever made. Now, I will say that there are definitely times where reviewers get an easier version of the game to help these people actually review the game in general. I don't know if they're doing this with Monster Hunter. It's very possible the game comes out and is harder for people than what the reviewers are saying. But Luke Stevens, for example, said his average hunt time was under 15 minutes. So you can expect these to be a lot shorter and a lot easier than we played previously, or we played in the predecessor to this game. I know Monster Hunter Rise, for example, was pretty damn easy throughout the entire game, but this one seems to be potentially even easier than that.
At the end of the day, I love the game. It's definitely a bit easier in the initial approach than previous Monster Hunter entries, and on top of that, I do think that the low rank experience is going to be very different from what people are used to.
Whether I was playing online or solo, I've never had a mission reach the 20-minute mark, and I've only fainted 2 times total across dozens of hours.
And I have not failed a quest. I have not been downed or fainted 3 times, in effect, within a single mission. And my average completion time with optional hunts at high rank has been under 15 minutes.
Another thing here though, on the difficulty, the game always gets way harder as more updates, master rank monsters, expansions come out for the game. That tends to be a million times harder than stuff you play at the start of the game, like the low rank and just generic high rank monsters. So it is going to get way harder. The baseline of Monster Hunter is always by far the easiest. They didn't release Fatalis in the base game of Monster Hunter World, for example, which is one of the hardest fights I've ever fought in any game ever. Now, the next big negative and takeaway almost every reviewer has had is the performance.
I would say that the final game runs significantly better than the beta, but in my view, it still needs improvement.
It's not a perfect game technically, and the fact that it runs so poorly is a huge bummer.
And we saw the performance lacking in the betas. It just was not very optimized, and it would struggle to get up there to 60 FPS almost all of the time, and that still seems to be consistent, albeit a little bit improved for the final release of the game. We've seen reviewers talk about crashing and different visual glitches in general, especially later on in the game. So all of this hopefully gets improved with a day 1 patch, for example, but I guarantee there are going to be performance issues and there are going to be bugs throughout this game. It's going to be probably impossible for just a day 1 patch to fix all of these issues. Another negative here is the story, and although I wouldn't normally talk about story for Monster Hunter because I don't care about the story for Monster Hunter, I've never really cared about the story for any Monster Hunter games previous, this game supposedly puts a way bigger emphasis on the story, and more time is allocated to the story in this game versus pretty much any other Monster Hunter game before this. And with the story apparently getting negative feedback about not being great, it just takes away from you going out and hunting monsters and having fun in these games. And I haven't played the story myself, no spoilers here at all. Maybe I'll love it, maybe other people will love it, but the general feedback as of right now is the story, given more time, more emphasis, more cutscenes, etc., is still not very good. Now, 2 smaller negatives that I've picked up from just watching some reviews are that the later maps are a lot smaller and it doesn't seem like as much time went into these as the earlier maps. There's not much environmental impact on the later maps versus the earlier ones either, with monsters not doing as much dynamic environmental interaction later on in the game versus what you see in the map that we played in the beta, for example. And this isn't a huge deal in my opinion, because obviously a lot of studios do this where they put all of their effort into the start of the game to keep players engaged, and then they're engaged and they enjoy the rest of the game. So this is honestly to be expected a lot of times in games just in general, but it is definitely a bummer. It is really awesome when you see a game fully fleshed out, and the last map of the game is as fleshed out as the first one. Now this is something, again, I haven't played, so I'll have to see for myself. And then on top of this, one thing that I am a little bit worried about is actually farming monsters consistently. One thing that I love doing in World is just queuing up a quest, having people join and fighting a monster over and over and over again. With waiting different time periods, or waiting till the end of the day where it's nighttime for a monster to come out, or waiting for a certain weather pattern to come out so a monster pops out and I can finally fight it, might be a little bit annoying. You might not be able to farm monsters like you did in the previous games, or at least as consistently as you did in the previous games. Now I know there is a waiting system where you can pay a decent amount, supposedly, of research points to actually wait till nighttime to fight a monster that might come out in the nighttime, for example, but this might not be possible if you don't have those research points, at least earlier on in the game. But all in all, even despite the negatives that I mentioned here, the overall sentiment is definitely that this game is absolutely incredible, with some reviewers going as far to even say this is the best version of Monster Hunter.
I mean, it's one of those things where I'm obviously still in the honeymoon phase, and, you know, it might change over time, but right now it's my favorite Monster Hunter experience, period.
I can't deny how much fun I've been having. Like I said, I mean, you don't play something for 125 hours if you're not enjoying it. And on top of that, I've been having a blast doing multiplayer. I've been having a blast doing the SOS hunts and jumping in and hunting with other people and doing the higher end investigations. And it really has been a just tremendous time playing it.
I still loved Monster Hunter Wilds. I can't wait to continue playing more. And at the end of the day, like, most of my frustrations with it are that I want more of it, and I want more of it to be challenging so I can justify spending more time playing it.
And I can say confidently that this game creates a foundation so solid that one day it might very well become the best Monster Hunter game to date, but time will tell.
Now, I can't say that definitively at all until I actually play the game, but it's definitely an evolution on what we saw in previous games like Monster Hunter World that I think we've been waiting for a long time. The open world environment specifically is something, if you've been playing Monster Hunter for over a decade, I think a lot of fans were looking forward to finally seeing how it actually plays out. And it definitely seems like Capcom did a very good job of adding as well as changing how some of the mechanics in the game work to suit this open world environment, to suit how dynamic the environments are in general, and to suit how fluid they want this game to be in general. I would love to hear down below in the comments what you guys think about all this. Have you guys watched reviews already for Monster Hunter Wilds? What do you think about the overall sentiment of these reviews? Are these negatives sticking out to you as something that might make you enjoy the game less? Or are everything that people are enjoying about the game making you extremely excited about it? Did you play the beta? How did you feel about that? I would love to hear what you guys have to say about Monster Hunter Wilds in general down below in the comments. If you guys are new to the channel, again, please like and subscribe if you liked what you see here, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace!